Vyas, and this video is a collaboration with Programming Knowledge. Welcome to the fifth video of building a JUnit unit test application with Springboot REST API system. In the previous videos, we had built our REST API, we had built the domain and persistence layers for our application. We also had created the business layer for our application, and we did that using the book record, which had the entity table annotations and also the fields. We also created an interface called as book repository, which extended the JPA repository, and it basically helped us with out of the box methods for CRUD applications on our API. The last was the book controller, which we had implemented in the previous video, where we had implemented API endpoints such as get all books, get book ID, post mapping, put mapping, and we will be implementing the delete endpoint in the upcoming videos using the TDD method. Now, from this video, let's actually start doing the unit test or writing the unit test for our applications and see how they look like, how they work, and so on and so forth. So we will be writing a unit test for the book controller to check whether these methods are working properly or not, which we had implemented. So we need to test the method or these methods. So get all book records, book by ID, create book record, update, and also delete whenever we write it. So to do this, first we need to go inside test Java and create a test class. So we do new Java class and we call this book controller test, as we're unit testing the book controller class. And inside this, now we need to add a lot of things. And before we do that, let's talk about something called as Mockito, which we will be using for our application. So to give you some context for why we are going to use Mockito, now we just need to test this, right? We just need to test get book by ID, and it should return us a book. We should test that this method is working, and every other external API in that method is not something that we need to test. We can write tests for the book repository, but mainly we are testing whether the methods work and if it's returning everything properly as intended. So we don't really need to always call the book repository whenever we are writing tests for the controller, because the point of writing the test for the controller is to test the controller and not the repository. So what we need to do is find a way to actually mirror the methods given by the book repository or mock them, so that we always know what we get back from the book repository and it is not dependent on an external class such as the book repository class here. So for that, to mock the methods and what we return from the book repository, we use a framework called as Mockito. So now let's talk about Mockito for some time. Mockito is a popular open source framework for mocking objects in software tests. Using Mockito greatly simplifies the development of tests for classes with external dependencies. Now, a mock object is a dummy implementation for an interface or a class, in this case the book repository. It allows to define the output of certain method calls. They typically record the interaction with the system, and the tests can validate that. Now, let's see how it works. So here is a very good website which helps understand how it works. So first, we mock dependencies for the class under test. So we will be mocking the book repository. We execute code in the class under test that we do in our testing class, and we validate if the code executed is as expected as we wanted it from the test. So for those reasons, we will be using Mockito. And now let's understand how Mockito works inside our application and inside book controller test. So let's go ahead and start implementing it. Before we do that, let's quickly set up our REST API properly before we end up with that, because we saw some errors in the previous video when we were running the application. So let's quickly clear them out. So we need an application dot properties file inside our resources folder, and all we need to do is just have a single line which updates Apache Derby automatically, so that we don't have to worry about those values later on. And yeah, once we have this, our application should be up and running smoothly. So let's test it right now. Let's run the application and make sure that the application is running pretty smoothly without any issues. Just wait for a second and make sure that the application is running smoothly before we write our tests. We have the console up, and let's quickly see whether everything is running properly or not without any errors. So far so good. We have our database being registered. Everything is looking good. Start completed, so the database driver is ready. JPA is being initialized, and Tomcat's web server is running, and as you can see, no errors, and we are good to go with our API. Okay, awesome. So now that we have our API complete and up and running, we need to start using, writing our tests. So before we actually write our tests, we need to add some annotations to make sure it's test ready. So first we need to do is do a run with, and we'll be running with Mockito JUnit runner. So this will ensure that we are only using Mockito to run our class, nothing else, and make sure that it doesn't have the web server up because we just want to test the methods inside it, not the web server. The next thing which we need to do is have something called as mock MVC, and we need a mock MVC object here. We will initialize this before, but this is something which we need. The second thing which we need is an object mapper. So we want to convert a JSON to a string and vice versa, because when we do a post request, we want to send the JSON as a string. So let's quickly do that. So we do an object mapper, equal to new object mapper, and next we want an object writer, object mapper dot writer. So now we have our object writer ready, and we can use this for all the classes, but for now we are only doing it globally. Not recommended, but should suffice for this tutorial, because we want to focus more on the unit test part and less on the functionality of how everything else works. So let's focus on unit test now. Now let's see how do we mock the book repository, because we don't want to call this every single time we run our tests. So we can do that by the mock annotation class by Mockito. All you have to do is mock what? Mock the book repository, and now we have a mock ready for our controller test called from book repository. And the class which is going to accept the mocks is going to be the one where we inject it. So we inject the mocks inside our book controller class, and this basically tells us that so the book controller will be accepting the book repository as a mock inside it. So we call it as inject mocks. Next, let's create some test data. So book record 1, and let's quickly import the book class, and this will be new book, and let's quickly give it the name. So let's say atomic habits, the summary, how to build better habits, and a rating would say 5 for this book. Next, let's create some other records. So record 2, new book, give it an ID. Name can be thinking fast and slow. Summary can be how to create good mental models about thinking, and give it a rating as 4. The last book that we can add is my favorite book, so let's add this quickly. Which will be new book CL and grokking algorithms, learn algorithms the fun way, and this is going to be a hands down 5. Spell algorithms correctly if you're using it. And yeah, we have 3 books ready. We have our mock, we have our book controller, and all we have to do now is set up our class. So let's do that. Let's quickly set up our test class. So we have this annotation called as before. This will run the method which we are going to implement before every single test. So before every single test, what we need to do is we need to set up our class. And we want to set up Mockito first. So what we do is we do Mockito annotations. So Mockito annotations dot init mocks, and we do this. So this basically this piece of code basically initializes Mockito inside our class, a boilerplate code. And the next thing which we need to do is initialize our mock MVC. So we'll do it by mock MVC builder dot standalone setup, and we want the setup only for the book controller class, and we do a build on it. Now this ensures that we are using Mockito and mock MVC for our book controller class, and it will not spin up any Tomcat web server, and it will mock our book repository when we are using it. So in this way, we understand how Mockito works, and we have our test class ready for some tests. And now in the next upcoming videos, let's start writing tests for our book controller class for each and every method that we've implemented. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.